Hello, this is Geordie Nativity by me, Davy Craig. Here goes. War Joe was a good canny lad, one of the canniest lads you could ever hope to meet. He served his time as a joiner at Leslie's shipyards in Hebburn, back in the days when they still built ships. He would do out for anyone, would War Joe, and he'd tackle out for the big gaffer who thought the world of him. Now Joe had two loves in his life. One was Newcastle United, of course, and the other was his lass, Mary. Now Mary was a git canny lass, bonny and all, who wouldn't say a bad word about anybody. One day though, Mary was in a right fettle with herself and was waiting for the bus to drop Joe off at the top of Nazareth Street where they lived in Hebburn. He'd been to the match with his mates, but he didn't like to stop in the booze out with his mates for too long afterwards, because he didn't like leaving Mary by herself for very long. He just liked to snuggle up with Mary in front of the fire and that, but he daresn't tell his mates that because they'd just take the piss like. As the bus pulled up, Joe waved his black and white scarf at Mary, who he dicked out the window. He could tell that something was up though. "What's the matter, Mary, pet? Your face is tripping you," said Joe, worried about their lass. "I'm all right, Joe, man," said Mary, "but I've got something git weird to tell you. I was just peeling the tatties for the soup when you were at the match, when that canny deputy, Gabriel, you know who I mean." "Aye, Gabriel, aye, he's canny, aye." "Why, he just appeared out of nowhere like, and out of the blue, he told us that I'm gonna have a bain with a big gaffer." "You what?" said Joe, who was suddenly geet up a height. "It's all right, man, Joe," said Mary. "Dinna fret, 'cause he didn't touch us out now like that, like. And I've never seen the big gaffer at all. Dunno where he is. I'm in a canny enough fettle, like, but I was just worried about telling ye." Joe smiled when he saw that Mary was git happy, and he knew they'd be all right, even though he thought he was getting a bit micey like. Now at this time though, there was some git bad stuff going on. Now the toon had been bought by this right dodgy get called Mike Herod, and he was running Newcastle United into the ground so he could sell his cheap crap on the back of it. He was a right worky ticket and a git crabby get, and clearly in with the Tories, shocking like. On top of this, the Tories themselves had rigged the last election by saying that Worcester was a bit of a twat and they suddenly controlled everywhere you could think of. This new fella, Boris Augustus, was in control, and he was a right useless git. Joe got word from the Inland Revenue around that time that he had to go into Bethlehem Road, where he was born, for the census. The Tories were after putting taxes up, like, and everyone had to go back to where they were born to register. It was a canny height to Bethlehem Road and all, I can tell you, which it was all the way past the west end of Newcastle, and the metros were knackered, and as usual there were no buses that went anywhere near the place as well. Joe had been on strike at the shipyards and all for ages because the Tories were going to close it down as they did with everything else, so he didn't have enough money even for a taxi or nout. Joe and Mary then had to walk all the way, but Mary was due to have a baby and her feet were killing her. As they headed along the Tyne, they passed by Bilkey Farm, and the canny lass who ran it started chatting on to Joe, and Joe told her what was going on, and she lent Joe a donkey, so at least Mary could have a sit down like. After a canny long walk, he was still looking for somewhere to stop or eat though, but everywhere was full because there was a cup match the next day. Even the local boozer, the Bethlehem Inn, was full. He pleaded with the landlord. "Oh, away, man, Geordie," said Joe. "Our lass is up the spout and ready to drop. We'll never make it back to the RVI, and we need a room for the night. It's freezing and it's forecast for teams of rain and all, man." "I'm sorry, Joe," said Geordie, the pub landlord, "but we're full, man, and I cannot just hire me customers out on the street. I tell you what I can do. Look, there's a stable at the back, next to the netty. It's not the best, but at least it's warm. So, Joe, I'm sorry, but it's the best I can do, like." In the meantime, three fellas who ran a curry house in King Street in South Shields in the east had come following a blue star. They were git clever lads and that, but had no street sense at all. They'd heard that a new striker for the toon was going to be born soon, and he was going to be bigger than Alan Shearer. Aside from no doubt playing for the toon, he was also bound to get rid of the Tories once and for all. They assumed he'd be born in the toon itself, So they headed to St James's Park, as you would, hoping to see him. Now Mike Herod was there, and he was curious as to why they'd come all the way from South Shields. So they told him that a git special bairn was going to be born. Mike Herod, when he heard all about this, was absolutely livid, man. He was obviously a Mackem in disguise. Didn't want it out to good to happen to the tune though. So he told the three lads that they must have got the wrong end of the stick and sent them on their way. They realised that they'd already said too much to Mike Herod, who they could see was a right twat though, and they didn't let on about out else. All they did say to him was, "Ta-ra on that, like, but we're gonna just go and for a pint in the strawberry, go and for a curry, and then we'll probably just jump in a taxi. See you later." As soon as they'd gone though, Mike Herod got onto the DWP to find out if any of the bairns were going to be born soon, so he could batter them and get rid of Newcastle's future number 9. Terrible, man. In the meantime, the three lads had only had a quick pint in the strawberry, so they could come out and follow the Blue Star again. They walked up Westcott Road and eventually found Mary, Joseph and the new bairn who'd been born that very night, Jesus. They gave Joe some presents for the bairn. A black and white tune top, of course, a link set and a bit of dosh to help the bairn on his way. But before they left, they tipped a wink to Joe and told him about Mike Herod. Joe couldn't believe it, man, and he knew he'd have to give up his season ticket and keep well out of the way for a few years. The three fellas told him that they'd have to live in the wilderness for a few years, so Joe and Mary ended up getting a council house in Pennywell. They had no choice, like, and would have to wait until Mike Herod was gone for good. They were more worried about sending the bairn to a Mackem school and him ending up talking funny, like, but they couldn't go back to heaven just yet. So, a few years later though, a git canny lass called Mandy turned up in the tune. She had a bit of a Dixie round St James's Park and she said she'd be back. A while later, Mandy came back with her hubby, a couple of builders from down south and a few fellas from the east, even further east than South Shields, like. Now these lads were minted, man, and they told Mike Herod to get on his bike and bugger off. He tried to get on his bike for the first time in ages. The seat post went right up his arse and his fat belly exploded. No more Mike Herod. Joe heard about all this on Sky Sports and they all left the wilderness, and he came to St James's Park for a huge party where Sam Fender turned up and everything. Mandy and the lads spruced up St James's Park and also wanted to help all the people who were living in awful conditions under the Tories. Joe managed to get a season ticket with a dosh the three fellas had given him, because someone had a bond to sell, and he's loving it, man, knowing that also in a few years his little lad will no doubt be playing for the tune and will actually win summit for the first time in donkeys. The end.